It's 4:32, and the City of Cleveland Board of Education will now get started. If everyone will stand, we're going to have a moment of silence, and then Ms. Jody Riggins will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the new year, 2023. I'm glad you guys are all joining us here. All right, so before we get started, let me say a couple things. Preparing for these meetings requires labor from both Dr. Dyer and the Cleveland City School staff at many levels. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we appreciate the work that you do to support our meetings. In addition, I want to say a special thanks to Board Secretary Andrew McMackin for work that happens behind the scenes and so many times pulling us all together, keeping us focused on things, and then coordinating us all, rallying us all together for meetings and things like that. So, all right, as chairman of the Cleveland City Schools Board of Education, I'm committed to a couple things that I want to mention. I'm going to read a couple other things for you. Running an orderly meeting. I don't think we'll have a problem with that today because of the front row right here. Committed to treating everyone with respect. And then board members around our table here, they're all going to have an equal voice for all matters, and our comments should be communicated through the director of schools, as previously mentioned in other meetings, for addressing his staff. So for those that are with us, that are parents, guests, I just have a couple of reminders for you. The Board of Education policies are on our website, and you can visit that at clevelandschools.org website. When there, you can click on menu and select policy manual under the Board of Education section. I want to also mention that our meetings are not a public forum. However, the board has made accommodations for you to address the board via our school policy under 1.404, which has the requirements listed. So again, thank everybody for attending. We're going to proceed with our meeting. And the first thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. So I'd like to ask the board members, is there anything that you want to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? All right, sounds like there's nothing to be removed, so I'd like to entertain a motion for approving the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, are there one last chance for discussion? All right, all in favor of moving or approving the consent agenda as listed, say aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Noes? All right, so approved, 100%. All right, so the next thing on our agenda is a policy review and approval of Section 2. And in this particular document that you board members have, it lists all of the policies that are changed or that have been reviewed that didn't require changes, but we're denoting that date of update or review as such. So I wanted to proceed with entertaining a motion for these date changes or date updates.
So moved.
Is there a second?
second.
All right, so all in favor of the change in dates, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so approved. All right, so the next thing on the agenda, we'll turn to Dr. Dyer for the director's update.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. We have a spotlight coming up in a minute that's going to be important for two different groups. But I also want to recognize Tom Cassida. Thank you for being here from City Council. We have some principals in the back of the room. Thank you all for being here. And we're glad to always have BCPEF and the Chamber as well here supporting us today. So thank you all for being here. First, I want to say just happy 2023. I've hoped that you all, everyone who's watching in the room or online or our board has had a good start to the new year. We started our classes back today, of course. Teachers and staff came back last Thursday and Friday. but from all reports I've had anyway, we've had a very successful first day back, and glad to have our students back in the building with our staff and teachers again. Last week we did have 2 days of staff development training. On Thursday we had staff development training with principals and assistant principals, and then Friday was a staff development day with our teachers and staff. That was over several things. Capturing Kids' Hearts was a training that we had for bus drivers, for other folks at our central office, other people who have not been through the full training. They had a half day of training on Capturing Kids' Hearts. They've a lot of times heard about Capturing Kids' Hearts, but we wanted them to get a little bit more depth information. So that was fun to see and be part of that particular day. Math textbook adoption was a big part of that day as well. We had different vendors that were here to present to teachers so they could hear about the curriculum, kind of get hands-on information with what's going on as far as math adoption is concerned, pacing guides, technology, ESL, all those different topics and many, many more things were discussed those days with professional development. Buildings in winter weather, as you guys all know, everybody knows, it got fairly cold a couple of weeks back, and now we are, of course, in the 60s and stuff again. But I looked, chance of snow on Friday, mainly in the mountains though, so don't get too excited about that, everybody. But we did have during that cold snap a few issues that popped up, but I really appreciate Hal Taylor, our operations department, our principals and staff really working together to prevent most issues from happening. Some things you can't prevent, and you're always going to have a few mishaps when you have as many buildings as we do. But for the most part, through preventive measures, we were able to really stop major issues. And the issues we did have, Cliff, Hal, Taylor, others really jumped in there and took care of those right away. So I certainly appreciate that. Just a reminder, this coming Monday, January 16th, is Martin Luther King Day, so we will have that day off. Our students will have the day off of school, and our central office will be closed as well, so just a reminder on that. And with that, that is my update for today.
Thank you, Dr. Dyer. All right, so next on the agenda, we have a spotlight, and I'm just going to turn it right back over to Dr. Dyer.
All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Cliff Eason. Cliff is going to do our spotlight with our school SRO team.
All right, well, today is truly a day of celebration. For one, it's a day of celebration because if you stayed up late last night, you saw the Georgia Bulldogs win the national championship against TCU by 65-7. It was their second national championship. So I wanted to make sure to get that out and make sure everyone was aware of that.
Sure, that's now on the record, Cliff. Thank you.
Thank you, sure. But also, it's a day of celebration and recognition for our SROs and YSOs as well. Yesterday was National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. We wanted just to take a few minutes to recognize them and let them know how much we appreciate them and the great job that they do for us each and every day. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce them, ask them to stand, identify the school that they work for, and then ask them also if they would tell the number of years that they have in service to the police department or juvenile court, and then also the number of years that they have in service to the particular school that they serve as well. And then I think we also have a little gift as well for each of them. Okay? All right, so we're going to start with secondary level at Cleveland High School. We have Officer Willie Espinoza and Officer Michael Gunnell. If you guys would stand. You tell how many years you have with the police force and then also how many years you have as an SRO.
With Cleveland, I've had 7 years, but total law enforcement, it's almost 19 now. With Cleveland High School, I've been there 4 years now.
That's great. And then we have a gift for you also, Officer Willie. Officer Goodell is not with us tonight. His wife is having a baby this week, and so obviously we excused him from being here tonight as they have something a little more important going on. Cleveland Middle School is next. We have Officer John Milan and Officer Nathan Milam as well, if you would stand. If you don't mind telling.
9 years with the city, and then my first year at Cleveland Middle.
Cleveland Middle School. Okay, great. And Dr. Dyer has a gift for you.
All right. Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it.
We have Arnold Elementary School, Officer Chris Mason.
I've got 20 total years, 18 with the city, and probably maybe 8 with SROs.
Okay, great, thank you. Mayfield Elementary School is next with Officer Scott Bronze.
Working my 22nd year at police department, and it's my first year in Mayfield.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, you get the big bow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Stewart Elementary School is next, Officer Jansen Vassy.
I've got 13 years with the city and 4 years at Stewart.
Blythe Bauer Elementary, and it's Officer April Ratcliffe.
I have 23 years with the city and 18 at Blythe Bauer.
Wow, that's great.
That's awesome.
E.O. Ross Elementary is next with Officer Zach Kilby.
I have 4 years in law enforcement with the city, and this is my first year at E.O. Ross.
Great.
Thanks, sir.
Yates Primary, Officer Taylor Ryans. She's not with us tonight, but we will pass along the gift. And then Candies Creek Cherokee Elementary School, Officer Mike Harris is in the back there.
Yeah, he's here. He's here.
30 years with the city police department,
Wow.
and it's my 4th year at Candy Street.
There's going to be 30 more, right, Mike?
That's right.
And then also Sergeant Charles Burke is with us. He is the SRO supervisor. And he does fill in from time to time if we have an SRO that's out or if we have a specific need or something too. So we appreciate you as well. Okay.
This is my 11 years at the department, and then this will be my 3rd school year in this position.
That's great. And then from Bradley County Juvenile Detention Center, we have 2 YSOs that serve in that capacity. We're going to start with CMS with Stephen Rogers.
Been with the county 13 years, and this is my 5th year at Cleveland.
Great. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
And then last but not least, at CHS, Miss Nancy Stanfield, which you all, I'm sure, probably know because she has been around quite a while. Miss Nancy. I mean that in the kindest way, that you're very, very experienced.
And how well did you do with juvenile court when you were in the high school?
When you were covering for me, I did very well.
Okay, juvenile court, 27 years. Cleveland High School, 15, 16, 17, I'm having some.
Lost count. All these folks do a great job for us. They have a tough job to do, but they really do a fantastic job. We're really happy to have them on board. So thank you very much, folks, for your help.
Any comments?
Does anybody have any comments?
Just appreciate everything you do, how you serve our schools and keep them safe. Thank you.
And I think y'all, we're just so fortunate to have you all. The kids enjoy you all so much. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, oh, I just love to have lunch with them because you all sit down at the table, I think, with the kids and have lunch and they love it.
What you do really, really matters.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate very much all that you do.
Thank you so much. 2 of these people I've worked with and appreciate them just as much now as I did when they were at Yates, so thank you.
I've gotten to meet so many of you through different courses of life, but my kids come home from school and just talk about the example that so many of the SROs do to this community. And to me, that's the big impact for our next generation is what you're probably the only interaction many of these children will ever have with law enforcement. And I don't know what they do to pick you guys out, but you're the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned. And so thank you.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to chime in that it doesn't go unrecognized.
that you do so much more than any job description could
Yes.
ever list.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for all that you
Yes.
do.
Yeah, 300%. Well, we'd love to get a picture. Can we do a picture and have maybe you all stand in the front here and?
Can we get Dr. Dyer in cuffs? Is that?
Hey, that would be a good picture now. That would look good on Twitter.
That would be good.
No.
Come on in. Come on. Put her to work. We'll just pretend that they see us.
Which one would you have to say anything about your height?
We're doing his calendar here.
There we go, second.
Thank you.
Wait, oh, don't move. Don't move. Don't move.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
And ladies.
Thank you very much. You certainly appreciate it.
Do you have any more spotlight?
I do. I think I do. I'm letting them go first. Okay, plenty of open seats up front now, so come on down. Well, good. We do have another spotlight. This is pretty important. National School Board Appreciation Week is January 23rd through the 29th. And we do not have a formal board meeting scheduled at this point for that week. But we want to go ahead and show our appreciation to our school board today. You can see your pictures on the screen there. I have the opportunity to visit with school superintendents across the state, and honestly, a lot of times around the nation. And a lot of times I hear about issues at schools or school systems and school boards or whatever the case may be. And I'll tell you, I feel very fortunate to work in Cleveland, Tennessee. This city, this community supports public education, and they've elected, I think, great representatives to serve on this board, to serve this community. And I certainly appreciate the job that each of you do every single day, taking my calls, answering my messages, reading my emails, and so forth, to try to get information. So I certainly appreciate it. I know our principals, our teachers, hope the community in general feels that support as well, because that is important. I can't do it alone. I need people to bounce ideas off and to get feedback from and critical questions and all those kind of things. And I really appreciate that. So from my point of view, I appreciate each of you, the job that you do. I know it's when you sign up and you decide to run, it's one meeting a month on paper, but it's much more than that, much more than that. And it's really hard to make it to everything, but I appreciate the opportunities and the spunk you have to get in there and take it on and come to as much as you can come to. So that's what I wanted to share and tell you from my heart, kind of what I feel, and I know that's echoed in other people as well. So thank you very much. We do have some gifts for you as well that Andrea is going to get. I don't know where they are. So, but we want to give you just a token as well to show our appreciation for the work you do in each and every day as well. And I think as we get closer to that date, there will be some other things popping up on social media and so forth. So just kind of keep your eye on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. Yeah. I see a head shaking back there.
Yes. Dr. Dyer, I think all of us would say thank you for your leadership with us, and all of the people that we work with, parents, faculties. It's just a joy, and it's been interesting for me because I see it from both sides. Once I became a school board member, there were some things, that you understand a little bit differently from when you're on the other side of the desk.
Right.
And also now that represent this area on the TSBA board, I see it from a different perspective.
I'll bet.
So it's been very interesting, and I enjoy it. I just thank everybody for the opportunity that I have to serve. When you get chalk dust in your veins, you can't get it out.
I like that.
Does anyone else have any comments they want to share?
Well, I told everybody, I think it was last month, about my experience with Cleveland City Schools. I spent most of my life with Cleveland City Schools. I started out as a teacher, and then I was a school counselor, then I was director of special ed, and I was a school psychologist part of the time. And then I was off for a little while. I think I missed it, so I came back to be on the school board. It's been 16 years, and I love it. And all three of my kids went to Cleveland City Schools, and I have grandkids here that are still here.
That's right.
You know, so hopefully I'll get to see them graduate.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you all, and we will appreciate you the rest of the month as well. So. Yes.
All right, so next on the agenda, we have our communication audit report for presentation.
Okay. I'm going to ask that Caroline Corrigan come up and introduce our speaker today and get us kicked off with the audit report. So thank you.
Hi, I'd like to introduce Lee Shelton with NSPRA. She was here back in September conducting a lot of these focus groups and looking over our website and a lot of stories we've done here. So I'm excited to finally introduce her, and she has a lot of information to get to. So.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
So good afternoon, Chairman Tucker, Dr. Dyer, and board members. It's so good to see you all again. I got to see everyone in person except Ms. McKay, and we got to talk on the phone. I'm really glad that I got to have a conversation with all of you back in September. To give you a general overview of today's presentation, here's what I'm going to be covering this afternoon. The NSPRA Communication Audit Report, why and what it includes. And I'm going to be talking about the audit process specifically in Cleveland City Schools, the time frame, the stakeholders of those who took part, the key findings and the observations. I'm going to share those with you. The recommendations and action steps, considerations for implementation, and then I will be open to questions. But first of all, I want to have this little commercial break to talk about acronyms. Okay, so I'm going to try to not use very many acronyms. If there are, please just jot it down what the acronym is, and at the end I will be glad to answer a question of what that was. But I will say that NSPRA, or NSPRA, as we insiders call it, NSPRA is going to be dropped in here a lot. So we'll just be saying, and that's the National School Public Relations Association, as you see on this slide. So my name is Elise Shelton, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to have been the lead auditor for Cleveland City Schools. My background includes serving as a communication auditor for 6 years for NSPRA, for both large and small districts across the country. I also have a background in certification in crisis communication management as well, from the Institute of Crisis Management, which used to be in Louisville and is now in South Bend, Indiana. Another opportunity for Caroline to look at. They have them by Zoom now, so you don't have to travel to South Bend. But I did retire 3 years ago from the Clarksville-Montgomery County School System, where I spent 25 years of my career as Chief Communications Officer. In addition to myself on this audit, we have Barbara Hunter and Melissa Brom, the NSPRA executive staff, and also the NSPRA Communication Audit Coordinator, Susan Downing, who reviewed and edited the final audit. Next. So why do a communications audit? This was probably a question that all of you all had back when you all decided to do this. It's because you're committed to improving your public relations and communications effort in Cleveland City Schools. It's also assumed that you wish to view the school district and its work through the perceptions of others, and that CCS would not have entered into this audit unless you were comfortable hearing everything, right? So caution, this is my cautionary tale, caution should be observed when regarding the nature of such a review. Whenever opinions are solicited about an institution and its work, there's a tendency to dwell on perceived problem areas. So improvement is impossible unless there's information on what may need to be changed. It is important to note that perceptions are just that. So we talk about perceptions in this audit, and I want you all to understand that just because it's a perception doesn't make it actual. But if it's a perception, we've talked about the court of public opinion versus the actual court, we understand that perception is a strong indicator of communication gaps that may or may not exist. It's a snapshot or view of the district at the time of the audit. So whatever was happening in September may not be happening in January. So just know that it's a moment in time that we are capturing this. So this report is intended to build on the many positive activities and accomplishments of the district and the communications person by suggesting options and considerations for strengthening the overall communication program. Okay. The goal of this communication audit was twofold. It's really to seek data, opinion, perceptions, and from these to assess the effectiveness and management of public relations, marketing, and engagement efforts throughout the district. It's also to provide a customized recommendation of strategies and best practices to build on and enhance the overall communication program. Next. The audit process that Cleveland City began with your communications coordinator submitting materials used to interact with internal and external audiences. I conducted a rigorous review of these materials and examined them for effectiveness of message delivery, readability, visual appeal, and ease of use. I also reviewed additional information provided by the district, such as demographic data, strategic plans, communication plans, news coverage, board policies, reports, organizational charts, analytics, and more, which includes also looking at various sources in the city of Cleveland itself. Next, okay, got it. So acronym alert, SCOPE stands for the School Communications Performance Evaluations. And so we did also a SCOPE survey. And so to understand what we learned from the SCOPE survey, and this actually preceded my visit here in September. So that may have started, Caroline, in August maybe? Okay. It went August to early September before I got here, so all of this was happening before I arrived. We have a SCOPE communications coordinator who takes all the data, she's definitely a statistician, and put it all together for us to understand. So I want to just share a little bit about the NSPRA rubrics of practice at a high level that we use with the SCOPE. So alignment occurs during the results review, where an experienced school communications practitioner reviews the district's survey results, your district's survey results. Based on the lower scoring areas, the district is pointed to specific areas within the rubrics to consider changes or enhancements to your communication program. SCOPE is largely an outcomes-based assessment measuring the impact of district communications. So outside of a few demographic and open comment questions, all questions in SCOPE surveys are on a 5-point Likert scale. This enables the survey report to provide comparative data with national high, low, and average scores on a level playing field. So we look at probably almost 100 other school districts in the country and compare the data to each other. So using the industry standard equation for reliability, SCOPE calculates target participation rates based on the total in each survey audience required to achieve a plus or minus 3%, a plus or minus 5%, and a plus or minus 10% margin of error. SCOPE works closely with the districts through their survey campaigns to help them achieve the desired participation rate and raise reliability of their results. It should be noted that the participation numbers from the community group could not be counted as statistically significant due to a higher margin of error. Next. The core of the communication audit is the on-site focus group and interview sessions designed to listen to and gather perceptions from the district's internal and external audiences. Each of the 10 focus groups were guided through a similar set of discussion questions, which you have those questions in the back of your audit report that you received. Participants were assured that their comments would be anonymous and not be directly attributed to them if used in the communication audit report. So if any of you see one of your comments included in that audit report, You don't have to own that you're the one that said it, because nowhere does it say that you said it. Okay. Stakeholder groups represented in the focus group sessions and interview sessions are included in this slide right here. So you can see those are the 10 focus groups that we had. Next. Okay. So these are the stakeholders' perceptions of Cleveland City Schools. This is what I list under our key findings. The key findings section is drawn from consistent feedback that was shared in focus groups, interviews, and through the scope survey. The perceptions listed here came out as the most frequently shared comments. And it's from these key findings that recommendations are developed. Next. And just to emphasize again, these stakeholder perceptions come from focus groups and written comments on the scope survey. There were a number of written comments, and you want to look for themes and patterns. You don't want to have just one isolated comment and have that carry a key finding, just so you know that we saw these key findings in multiple ways. Next. So in the second bullet, let's look at the second bullet for a moment. So you're not the first school district where I've heard this. Cleveland, I'm not saying that Cleveland isn't special. You all are special, but this is pretty a common theme in school districts across the country. Doesn't mean you can't fix it or address it. We're going to talk a little bit more about our recommendations related to these. Next slide. So this slide and the following 2 slides reflect my perceptions that I extrapolated about the district, particularly its communication efforts, after reviewing the district materials, conducting focus groups and interviews, and reviewing the scope data and the submitted comments. So these are my observations about Cleveland City Schools. You've got a lot of fans in terms of the quality of teaching and learning opportunities. And I really heard that strong feeling of community support from especially your staff. So one of the jobs an auditor performs is a deep dive or examination of a district's communication tools and practices, in addition to listening to the voices of your stakeholders. So this is kind of, again, my observations of Cleveland City Schools. It was very clear that a strategic plan is missing and needed. As far as your brand identity, I see your logo and you know it, and that's great placement. But what does it mean? Being able to communicate that and what your school system is and stand for in the community. That's where the gap is. Okay. And then I think these are my last observations before we get to the recommendations. But these really help provide the basis for tailored recommendations in the report. So many groups mention wanting more support in communicating with non-English speaking families. So while it's a strength that you have a very diverse group here in Cleveland, it's also an opportunity to communicate with this group. I also heard a laundry list of different apps being used to communicate. That can be a problem, and I would just say less is more, so more effective. Next. So let's talk about recommendations. So recommendations focus on areas of growth and opportunities in the district's communication program, but should not detract from the positive efforts already taking place in the communications office. The recommendations are listed in a suggested order of priority, but the district may choose to implement different recommendations and action steps at different times. Some can be implemented immediately, and others may take several years, just to be honest. So more details on implementation are in the report, and the whole purpose of you having the report is so that I'm not standing up here reading a long report to you. But I will say that as you develop your strategic communication plan, we recommend that 4-step tried and true model. It's outlined as RPIE, which is research, plan, implement, and evaluate. All important steps in developing your plan. So you can list strategies, action steps, responsibilities, and measurements. And I just want to say once again that communication responsibility, it doesn't just fall on Caroline Corrigan's lap. It's everybody's job and everybody's role. She and I have talked a lot about best practices in school districts all over the country, small districts, large districts that can be brought to the size of Cleveland in terms of actions and things that you all can do. You can do things that a large district also does, but on a smaller scale. So, proactive issues management is one of the components, and that's one of the action steps that we talk about here. And I just want to say that in the focus groups, I heard concerns and confusion surrounding the why of decisions, as well as the timing of them being made. So there's some very, I hope, really effective ways to address that you all can use. And again, like I said about your logo, it's well recognized, but what it represents, or what I call the elevator speech, isn't clear. And all the people I spoke with, only one person nailed the elevator speech for you all. I won't identify them because it's anonymous, but it is in the report. Recommendation 2. And first of all, like I said a while ago, you all are not the only school district that struggles with keeping staff in the loop. But this recommendation that we have listed in your report can help guide the district actions to prevent employees from feeling that they are the last to know, which is a worst feeling ever. And employees also fear that they have no influence over decisions that directly affect their work. Dr. Dyer and I have talked about some leadership things like McCrell, and I was fortunate to have a wonderful trainer in McCrell. I don't think you were as fortunate, but I think the whole idea of educational research and leadership is a really good idea in terms of input, communication, and employee involvement. So there are a lot of things that you can go back. You already have that program. You can go back and look at that and pull it up as well. And also in the report, and Caroline really likes this, are listed a number of what we call quick wins, and you saw those in your report. And those are steps with relatively simple implementation, and they address an issue or concern. So that's something that you can almost do instantaneously, hence quick win. So when looking at establishing protocols in action step 2.5, it makes sharing information about decisions more systematic with a series of questions to be answered. I love these questions. I've used them just about for everything that I ever did. Asking those questions gets you right to the root of what you need to communicate and how you need to communicate. And that can be taken from the district level to the school level. So as a principal, I encourage you to look at those questions. I assume you all are going to get access to the report. Great questions to be able to ask when you're about to implement something at the school level. Next. So however Cleveland City Schools decides to approach this recommendation, I think everyone agrees that something has got to happen. I got very consistent feedback from stakeholders that the website and the app are not effective communication tools. Involving stakeholders and how to best address the issues they found problematic is key. So the end user is who can fix this or who can help identify how you fix it. So action steps include identifying the user needs, testing the experience from the user perspective. Your website should be your virtual front door, welcoming everyone to come in to find relevant, timely, helpful, updated information. So I know I said you can't make everything your priority, but I would definitely look at this one. Recommendation 4. Next. Thanks. So key findings made during the course of the audit included the district's crisis communication process. Sorry all the law enforcement people had to leave because we probably could have used them to jump in here on this. That's action step 4.5 is involving community agencies, and Carolyn and I have talked about how you can make that happen. Sometimes it's hard to bring law enforcement to the table. They're, There's a whole lot of different agencies involved. We've seen it nationally. It's a challenge, but it can be done. I promise you, it can be done. And we've talked about some strategies off of the report of what can happen to make that occur. So after reviewing the district materials and then hearing the focus group feedback, it's recommended that a more comprehensive crisis communication plan. I'm focusing on a crisis communication plan, not a crisis management plan. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the communication aspect of a crisis. As we all know, communication is the piece that sometimes falls through the cracks in a crisis. And sometimes it really could help prevent additional crises if you can communicate effectively what's happening. So we highly recommend that a more comprehensive plan be put in place using the action steps that are listed in this report. The steps can also be used in communicating serious incidences. It doesn't have to rise to the level of a crisis. For example, limiting communications to only the impacted building is problematic. With the speed of information and the challenge of rumor and innuendo, there are no secrets anymore. There's no, just it only happened here, so it's not going any farther than our walls. It's you have parents who have kids in multiple schools. You have teachers who have kids in the schools that might be affected, but they may not be in that school. Anyway, there's too much texting and too much social media going on. So you just don't even try to keep things inside that school. Just go ahead and put together the plan that we list on here, how you can do it, but put together the plan that would be effective in doing that. So preparation and training is essential. And I know that right now there's not really even tabletop practices, I don't believe, especially on the communication side of it. I will say that in Clarksville, that was something that we did a lot, even tabletops, to the degree that former superintendent, whom I know, he would get the heebie-jeebies sometimes because the tabletops were so realistic. And it definitely is. So we probably, but the more you practice it, the more natural it is to respond to it when it happens. Next. So as previously mentioned, in noting the district's strength, diversity is highly valued in the Cleveland community, but with that high value, there's also a commitment throughout the staff and stakeholders to ensure there are successful ways to communicate with non-English speakers. And it was a very sincere concern from everyone that I heard from, that they want to make sure that the district is being responsive to non-English speakers and finding ways to do that. So one of the action steps is to create that key communications network of non-English speakers. And there are very specific listings of how you can do that, increasing your materials, so the bilingual versions of them, and then expanding partnerships. And one of the things I noted in the report was that there is a Spanish-speaking radio station locally. And sometimes those media partners are valuable in helping facilitate conversations. I know that Maria was someone that I met, and she's wonderful. And I don't know, I'm not volunteering her anything, for anything, but I will say in one other district where they had a high number of Spanish-speaking parents, this individual who worked with the school district was able to go on the radio and answer questions and just to facilitate that conversation. So that's just another option that you all have for you. Next. So based on key findings and observations and feedback, there's a keen interest in engagement between stakeholders and the school board. So within this report, there are action steps that will help explore opportunities for the board and stakeholders to interact. I would say board and community relations can take many forms and should reflect the needs of your school community. I don't like to write recipes necessarily really specific because this school board is different than a school board in, say, Long Beach, California. So everybody has got kind of a little nuance to your community. So you all need to really, first of all, look at your policy on all things related to community relations. Those policies that I looked at are very familiar to me because I believe the Tennessee School Board Association drafted something for all school districts in Tennessee to use or modify. I highly recommend that you look at those policies and make it specific to Cleveland City Schools' needs. So I don't think that there's any rule that you make sure it's a carbon copy of what TSBA has. Tammy would maybe get mad at me. You're on the board. Don't tell Tammy that I said that. But a good first step is in updating that. I appreciate you looking at it anyway. And in addition to other action steps, the board may wish to strongly consider 6.2 and release a quick summary of actions that take place at your meetings. I heard a lot of people have a great deal of interest in what the school board decides, but they may or may not be watching the live stream. They may or may not come back and watch it later. But it's important that you have it. It's important that you have a live stream. It's important that your YouTube channel allows people to go back and watch it later. But depending on how long your meeting is, and I know I'm making it longer by talking, it's hard to really hit those high points. And people really just want to know. And they love your minutes, but they would like to not wait for the minutes, so they would like to know immediately, did something big happen, do I need to know? And whether media is here or not here, it's good to have that. And we've talked about how that can happen. Next. So this recommendation is seen as especially important, and that, I know, why is it number one? But you'll have to decide what you're gonna make your number one. But I'm just saying that as you move forward with your future facility and 5-year capital plans especially, and despite the low numbers of community participation in the scope survey, the feedback and the anecdotal feedback that I got from community stakeholders indicates a strong feeling of support with a desire for involvement. And Cleveland City definitely should take advantage of the interest and expand opportunities for the community to be more involved beyond what is happening. I would say that the community may not be engaged as indicated in that scope survey, but I will say they definitely have a stake, and I just call it the heartstrings and the purse strings, whether they have kids in the schools or not. Kids are important to them, and purse strings because, I know where the money comes for the budgets in Tennessee. I know where it comes from: sales tax, property tax, and wheel tax and other local taxes. So they definitely have an interest, whether they're directly connected or not. So I spoke earlier about a key communicator network for non-English speakers, and then I also recommend one for the community at large. And you definitely have got people that were in the room with the community focus group that I had, and you all know who, or Caroline knows who they are, but I would take those folks and expand it to have a key communicator and make those people integral in all communications from the district, anything that's happening, anything important, because they then will be able to share at the grocery store, share in a board meeting or whatever, what's happening. You don't have to depend on just pushing everything out on your website or in media, but you've got people who are in the room hearing that. Also, there's opportunities to solicit public input that doesn't require attendance at a meeting. You don't really have room for everybody to come anyway, as we just saw tonight. But there are opportunities that they can be involved. I love what you all have done in terms of going out to the schools, the lunch and learns. Might consider taking that a step further and inviting the community to things like that. So depending on how you run those meetings, having them come to the schools as well and get an inside view. And that's one of the last bullet point that I wanted to make was action step 7.4. And not because I've done this before, I actually stole the idea from a Texas school district. And you know, that's what communications people do. They borrow great ideas and make them their own. But rolling out a leadership program, I know you all have a Leadership Cleveland, I believe, and we had a Leadership Clarksville, and there's a Leadership Middle Tennessee, and there's a Leadership blah, blah, blah. But what you do is you're focused in on Cleveland City Schools. You don't have to make, you know, a full year of it. You could do a half a year, you could do 5 or 6 months of it, half days, to make it easy, but it gives a much broader and more focused attention paid on Cleveland City Schools than what another organization can do. But so that you all would run those days, and there's information in your report. So, and also there's a couple of web links in there of other districts that are using this program. Next slide. So Cleveland City Schools definitely has a vibrant social media presence, but honestly, having social media for the sake of social media may not accomplish your objectives. I know Caroline does a fabulous job. I talk to all ages and all the different groups, and it's just not your go-to place for information for Cleveland City Schools. They like it. They like seeing the pictures, looking at the analytics, which we can work on that a little bit more too, to really measure how many people are looking at your posts, and interacting and engagement is another big piece of that. So what you want is, if you're going to have social media, you want it to be a very vibrant, living thing, and not just like, okay, here's a picture, here's a video, and make sure that you're accomplishing some of your goals. So setting measurements for that. There's just a whole lot that you can do in terms of that. And then also, I've noticed since we had our debrief back in September, I'm seeing more video on the platforms, and that's great. And we've talked a little bit about more video and what you can do. Next. This is where we benchmark against the communication best practices nationwide. So I go through a very long list of rubrics, and I know that our school friends, everybody knows what a rubric is. So looking at all these the rubrics specific to these critical function areas and how Cleveland City is performing, this is the ratings that we have. And so it's based really for Cleveland right now. A lot of your categories are emerging, and then maybe 3 are emerging established. So there's work, there's opportunity. So we'll get started. Okay, next. So again, it's important for everyone to understand that this is not only a project for Caroline. Communications is everybody's responsibility, and I want to reinforce that there shouldn't be an expectation that all facets of this report be implemented within a calendar year. You're going to want to implement any changes with fidelity and with stakeholder input. So the work has just begun. You think that this report is the end, but it's just the beginning. Next. Okay. I want to thank again Dr. Dyer and his staff, and several of them that are here today, the school board, the CCS employees, parents and students, and the community for taking part in this audit and making communication a priority in the schools. I'm happy to address any questions that you may have related to the audit, including any acronyms that I may have left out. So I guess I'll address it to Dr. Dyer or Chairman Tucker.
Any questions? Thoughts?
Well, I thought it was interesting as I read through this, where it was talking about all the different apps.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I was like, okay, well, I'm not alone with this, because it's it's on this, it's on that. So it was interesting to see that in the report.
And you know what happens with apps? Sometimes a school prefers a certain app, or a group of teachers prefer a certain app. Parents may prefer a certain app, and then it kind of gets into that preferential, But the problem is, if you have multiple people using the apps, they don't know which one to go to.
Right. It gets overwhelming.
Or if their kids go from elementary to middle to high school, and they're using different apps, and yes.
I was just going to say, I appreciate it. The results, we're a large organization for this area. And, when I first came in 7 years ago, we did, I would call it a baby audit. We kind of dipped our toes in the water a little bit and got a few results, kind of worked on that a little bit, and took our social media from where it was to where it is now. And now we have, I think, great opportunities that we see in here to take it to that next level. So when you first read it, it's like, oh my gosh, we're not doing anything right. But we are. And I've heard that clearly through the audit. There are a lot of things that we are doing right. How do you take it to that next level now is what we're going to concentrate on. And that's where not just Caroline, but a team is going to really take this, and we're going to have to all roll up our sleeves and work together to take it to that next level. And that's what I'm excited about. We have opportunity. Now we have to put it into action.
Well, I just wanted to add to what you said earlier about the fact that we were even doing this audit demonstrates our commitment to improving our communications and how important it is to us and how we prioritize that. And this gives us those benchmarks to now know where we need to focus those efforts. So I really appreciate all of the work that went into this. I know how much work had to come from Caroline as well to coordinate and gather all that information so that you could make some good recommendations.
Absolutely.
I think it looks very thorough, and this will be very, very helpful for us and give us some direction.
I have a question. Appreciate the report that you provided. Thinking back over other school systems that you've done assessments on, and I'm not sure if you've done follow-up with them, but if you have, do you have a sense of, after the assessment's done and the next steps, how long it takes to move the needle? Is there any sense of that?
Well, I'll only speak for my former school district where I worked. We did actually 2 audits 10 years apart. The first audit we did, we had a new superintendent who came in, Sandy Husk. I don't know if you remember Sandy or not. She ended up she was the CEO of Avid most recently, and now she's at ASCD, I think. Okay. But Sandy was very forward-thinking superintendent, and I was hungry to have people look at our communications effort. And so we did the audit, and then 10 years later, when BJ was superintendent, we came back and did another one. And some things, the needle got moved on, and some things we still needed to push that needle some more. So it can really vary, sir. It goes anywhere. Sometimes a district gets all in and they make a bunch of change. It depends, again, on budget resources and people resources. So that's the key to it. If you can get several people working on it, you can have faster response and results. But it could be a little bit. I wouldn't just don't set your expectations that it's all going to be done by next calendar year. It's just not. It can't be done.
How soon do you think you should come back and do a review to see if we're making progress?
You might want to wait a little while if I'm still doing audits. I don't know. Probably not in 10 years. I probably won't be.
Ms. Shelton, where do you think the school board, what do you feel should be their first thing that they do? I read this last night, then I got up this morning, I thought, ooh, there's a lot of stuff here.
There is. I think the first thing that you all, and I assume that you all probably have some sort of annual training or a retreat or something like that. So the first opportunity that you have to look at your policies and pull all those policies that relate to communication, community relations, how you talk to the public, how you involve your public in your meetings, all of that. And I would sit down and have a conversation with all of you. Dr. Dyer, we've got these kind of benchmarks, I suppose, best practices from other school districts of things that can be done. But looking at the policies, and I put a draft suggestion in there, and you don't have to use that one, but you can take that and run with it. But I do think that based on looking at your policies on the website, if you have a commitment to engaging in your community, you're not doing what it says in your policy.
Yeah, and I will say the NSPRA website is fantastic. It's got resources, templates. We're a member of NSPRA, so we have a lot of things that are available free to us, but there are also resources that are fairly inexpensive that we can buy. For example, crisis management, that kind of walk you through templates that have already been developed that you can kind of plug and play with. So there's things that we have at our disposal that we can get started with on some of this, and then other parts may take a little bit longer to do.
I will say one of the Inspirus templates was done by Rick Kaufman, and Rick and I have done a lot of presentations together. Rick was the communications person at Columbine when that happened. So, and I noticed in your crisis communication plan that you have quotes from Rick, and also Nora Carr, who was INSPIR president when I was there. She's just recently passed away, but yeah, so you've already been using some of the
resources out there.
Resources, absolutely.
There's some more questions. wanted to say thank you for
Thank you.
doing this for us.
Well, I want to say thank you again, and with the chairman and Dr. Dyer's permission, I would like to ask Caroline to come up and come to the podium and share some thoughts on the audit report. And I'll get out of the way and let you talk.
Well, first, I want to say thank you for traveling all the way from Clarksville to present this. This was great. I also want to say thank you to the board members and the community members and the students and the staff. I mean, nearly 100 people participated in these focus groups, so it's definitely not just me and Elise who worked on this, so I really, really appreciate your time and input. I think this is a lot of information, a lot of good, wealthy information. As far as our next step, I really want to review these recommendations and prioritize what steps we think we need to tackle first, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Do you want them to ask any questions?
Do you have any questions for Caroline? You think at this point? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is first reading of policies. So y'all just relax and stretch a little bit if you need to. You won't distract us because we've been here already an hour or so. All right, so first policy on the list is 2.400 for revenues. And this particular policy had a change on line 19 where we added shall be placed in the system-wide school fund, and then the rest of the sentence on line 20 was taken out. Okay? So if you have any questions about this or concerns, we'll stop at each one if that's okay with you guys. Any questions, comments? All right, we'll move to the next one. Policy 2.401, gifts and bequests. This particular policy, we are taking out line 23, 24, and 25. Any questions, comments? All right, moving along. Policy 2.403 regarding surplus property sales. Line 5, we're adding an in and online platform for more clarification there. Any questions, comments? All right, the next policy is 2.404, school support organizations. This particular policy, we're striking the last part of line 7 and the full line of line 8. Any questions or comments? Next policy, 2.800, expenditure of funds. This is a much larger change. We're striking lines 1 and 2, and we're adding lines 3 through 23, and I'll give you a moment to look at those. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Nate, I just want to make sure and clarify and make it clear that these changes are based on recommendations by the Tennessee School Board Association, and they align with all laws and expectations from
Yes, that is correct. With all the changes that are being made, we submit it to TSBA for review. All right. Next policy, 2.801, regarding petty cash. We had several paragraphs there, lines 3 through 14. We're striking those to just have lines 1 and 2 that says Cleveland City School does not authorize the use of petty cash accounts for any purpose. All purchases and collecting of funds should be processed through the approved accounting methods. Any questions or concerns or comments?
So is this going to be a policy that's in the policy manual?
Yes.
So why do we not have a title? The titles are scratched out.
Yeah, I think that was an accident.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to fix that on the second reading.
Okay.
All right, the next one on the list, payroll procedures, which is 2.802. This particular policy, we're adding to line 5, inserting retirement or termination, and we're striking or retirement on lines 6. Part of line 5, part of line 6. Any comments, questions? All right, the next on the list, we have 2.803, salary deductions. This particular policy, we're inserting line 8, or a prorated equivalent thereof, as you can see there in red. Any questions, comments? All right, the next policy is 2.805, purchasing. We're striking line 16. We're adding line 17. The following purchases shall be submitted to the Director of Schools for approval. And there are 2 other pages, but those are the changes that I noted. Any questions or comments? And that was the last one for the first reading of policies. So if there's no more questions or comments, I want to entertain a motion for first reading of policies.
So moved.
First and second, all right. All right, is there any commentary? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None, all right, passes 100%. All right, the next item on the agenda is policy for second reading for review. This is 1.404, appeals to appearances before the board. All right, so on line 9, we are adding / pre-meeting requests. So for this particular policy, I'm just going to read the whole thing. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, because there are several changes here. All right, so for starting with line 1, appeals to the board. Any matter relating to the operation of the school system may be addressed at a board meeting. However, the board desires that all matters be settled at the lowest level of responsibility and will not hear complaints or concerns which have not advanced through the proper administrative procedures for or from the point of origin. If all steps of the administrative procedure have been pursued and there is still a desire to appeal to the board, the matter shall be referred in writing to the office of the director, and the board shall determine whether to hear the appeal. Appearing before the board section / pre-meeting requests. Individuals desiring to appear before the board must submit a written request with the scripted materials to the office of the director 3 days before the meeting. If the request is approved by the executive committee, the item will be placed on the agenda. Individuals placed on the agenda will be recognized at the meeting at the beginning of the meeting and given time to speak when their topic of interest is addressed on the agenda. All requests submitted, whether approved or denied by the executive committee, will be included in the board packet. Delegations must select only one individual to speak on their behalf unless otherwise determined by the board. The chairman may recognize individuals not on the agenda for remarks to the board if she determines that such is in the public interest. A majority vote of members present can overrule the decision of the chairman. Individuals speaking to the board shall address remarks to the chairman and may direct questions to individual board members or staff members only upon approval of the chairman. Each person speaking shall state his name, address, and subject of presentation. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes unless time is extended by the board. The chairman shall have the authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to board rules. Members of the board and director of schools may have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. Individuals desiring additional information about any item on the agenda shall direct such inquiries to the office of the director of schools. Water break. That's not in the policy. All right, moving on. Addressing the board on agenda items, same day requests. Any person may request the opportunity to address the board on an agenda item. A copy of the meeting agenda and a sign-in sheet will be made available 30 minutes prior to the start of any meeting of the board. Any person wishing to address the board must list his or her name, address, and agenda item for comments. The chair will recognize the first 5 persons requesting to comment on an agenda item immediately following adoption of the agenda. Any additional person may be approved by the majority vote of the members present. Each person will be given 3 minutes to address the board unless time is extended by majority vote of members present. Each person requesting to comment on an agenda item must agree to the following statement before addressing the board. The board wishes to hear opinion of interested parties on matters pertaining to the business of the board. All comments shall be restricted to the scope of the agenda item and shall not address topics outside of the board's meeting agenda. Failure to adhere by the rules of the board shall result in the chair terminating the remarks of the individual. Individuals speaking to the board shall address remarks to the chair and may direct questions to individual board members or staff members only upon approval of the chair. Each person speaking shall state his/her name, address, and agenda item for comment. The chair shall have the authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to board rules. Individuals desiring additional information about any item on the agenda shall direct such inquiries to the office of the director of schools. Now, I want to also ask that we insert, when it talks about any person, we say any person that lives within the city limits. That way it's crystal clear that we're only allowing city residents. Comments, questions?
Question on that, what if a county resident has a student in the city school?
You could say city limits for those who have family members enrolled in the city school, something to that degree. We could get our
Yeah, but I think that's
TSBA
important
team
because
to-
you may have employees that live in the county.
Yeah, but this is the second reading, so we'd have to insert whatever language you want to into that second reading now.
Yes.
So that you can have your final vote on that. So, yeah, what would you?
Where do you think the right place for that would be?
Anytime it says persons.
Right.
Maybe just adding a separate paragraph at the bottom, or a sentence at the bottom, defining persons to be individuals. Is somebody jotting down my notes, because I won't be able to repeat in the second.
Line 20.
And I wonder if it would be helpful to kind of have it be the a resident of the city or parent of the student. That way it's a parent directly involved.
Yes.
And just put clarification of person, a definition of what you
So
mean.
persons are intended to include
Right.
family members of students.
I don't know if family members would be ideal, or whether it would be parent or guardian.
Parent or
Parent or
guardian.
guardian,
I think parent or guardian.
Of either a student or,
Mhm.
and I think we need to include faculty and staff as well. That may live in the county.
Employees,
Employees.
even if they're not a parent, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully a parent doesn't need to, you know.
How does this sound? Resident of City of Cleveland, Cleveland City Schools employee or parent or legal guardian of a student enrolled in Cleveland City Schools.
I like
I think that's good.
All right, are there any other questions, comments?
I had two, if I could.
Okay.
On the first page, around line 7, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly, because the matter shall be referred in writing to the office of the director, and the board shall determine whether to hear the appeal. Is that saying that the board has sole discretion to make the determination of whether to hear it? Or are we saying the director and the board? How is that to be sentence interpreted?
I'm going to read the first paragraph.
Yeah, no,
Along
please,
with that,
please.
give me a second. So that is regarding employees. So as I interpret it, if they followed the procedures, the administrative procedures, which is outlined by the director's office, and there's a desire to appeal it to the board, they'll do that in writing to the director's office, and we determine whether or not to hear the appeal. That's the entire board.
Okay. Am I the only one that was confused by that? Okay.
Would you like to
We put
reword
period
it?
behind the director and then just make a second sentence, delete the and just say the board shall determine whether to hear the appeal.
That sounds easy. Understand?
Any
But,
concerns
I mean,
there?
The director is part of the board, right?
Well, I'm separate. I'm the board's employee, so I don't have a vote on that.
That would be my proposal, just make it clear as.
Anybody object to that? All right, so can we add that as because we're going to take a motion and we're going to have you read that statement that you there, but then add this as well, if that's okay.
So a period after the word director,
Strike and then just make the a capital.
the capitalized.
Shall determine whether to hear the appeal.
Okay.
And my last question was down on the second page around line 4. It talked about that this is this new stuff we're putting in with bringing people in. When we say 5 persons requesting to comment on an agenda item, is that 5 persons total that night, or is that 5 persons per each agenda item?
On an agenda item,
So it's one agenda item, so you can have 30 people if there's
yes.
6 agenda items.
Right.
Okay. Hopefully we don't have that.
Do we
You can
want
always
to
adjust
put
your
a
policies
max?
later too.
Not to exceed X number, depending on how long the agenda is? I mean, I don't think we typically have that many agenda items, but
I think you could do that. I've also seen time, not to exceed 30 minutes or whatever that time frame is too. So I've
and
seen
then
it both ways.
we could also include additional could be added at the vote of the board or whatever.
At the discretion of the board.
So where would you like to insert that time limit?
I think it's in, well, the time limit's not in there, but I think the additional persons portion is in
Yes,
there in the
right.
next sentence.
Would we want to, at the end of that paragraph, at the end of line 7, say the portion, the public comment portion is not to exceed 30 minutes or however long?
Unless extended by majority vote.
Yeah, I mean, is 30
Something.
minutes good, or do we need?
Well,
Each one
5
of them are
people
given 3 minutes.
times.
That would be 6 agenda items. Times, no, 10, or I have to do the math.
Let's see, they get 3 minutes to speak.
3:15. There'd be 2 agenda items, basically.
So looking at the agenda today, if you look at number 5 there on the left on the screen, can you scroll up a little bit? Now, these are not typically agenda items that people are going to want to comment on. However, if they do, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 agenda items in our meeting today. So this is a little longer meeting than normal, but I just wanted to make sure that.
5 for each of those.
Right.
You could change that. The chair will recognize the first 5 persons requesting the comment on the agenda, take out item, if that's a concern. I mean, that's another way to
Or
look at that. but
leave
that's-
it and see if we have a problem with it.
And then adjust
later.
later.
I mean, honestly, that may
Absolutely.
be where we're at.
We can always amend it later.
Well, I think that we need to have some sort of reasonable expectation that we're not gonna be here for 5 hours, you know? That, because we hope that most of these issues would be addressed through the other procedures. This is kind of that last resort opportunity. So we can always extend it if necessary, but I think it's helpful to have some sort of parameters to start with. And then if we choose to extend, if we've got a lot of people that are here for a lot of different reasons, we can always extend it as a per meeting option.
Yeah.
So how would you like to word that?
Well, I'd like some input on what you think is a reasonable amount of time to allot for that public comment.
If I,
Yeah.
we have a formula obviously built in with the amount of time based on the number of people that come in. What if we said that the board reserves the right to terminate public comment after 30 minutes?
Exceeds 30 minutes.
By a majority of vote.
Is that a good
That sounds
compromise there? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
Can you say that one more time?
The board reserves the right to terminate public comment, if that's the right word that we're using, after 30 minutes by majority vote.
Okay, so we have 3 changes. We're breaking up the sentence to make it clear on which line?
Line 7.
Line 7.
After word director, period.
Page 1, yep. And then the second one is adding a paragraph.
Okay, on line 7, second page, first paragraph at the end, the board reserves the right to terminate public comments after 30 minutes by majority vote.
Yeah, so it's only 2.
Right.
Okay. All right, so
Well, we were talking about
Other
persons
The other,
within the city.
right, where do you want that part to go? I wrote that at the bottom, and then we were gonna have to go back and insert it. Where did you?
so that's the third one.
We can either do it anytime a person is mentioned, or do what Matt mentioned and said, have a line at the bottom or somewhere. that
Mhm, just add
defines a
after-
person.
After line 20?
Definition at the
Yes.
end.
Okay.
Is at the end favorable?
At the
Right,
end,
yeah, the
the
end,
definition
yeah.
at the end.
Wherever person is mentioned,
Sure.
it is intended to,
Okay.
whatever.
Right.
Include.
Person is defined as resident.
Right. Yeah.
Let me write that down. So, what I have for that,
Well,
wordsmith as needed. Oh,
I don't think person can be defined as resident if we're saying an employee that has a kid that may live in a different town.
That was just the start. He has those 3
Oh,
different
okay,
categories,
okay.
right?
This was, okay, this is
I'll
what I
let you
have,
read it. I'll let you
wordsmith
read
as
it.
needed. Person is defined as, person is defined as a resident of the city of Cleveland, Cleveland City Schools employee, or parent or legal guardian of a student enrolled in Cleveland City Schools.
Yeah.
And that will go as line 20 on page 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We'll get all that.
I would like to entertain a motion to accept this policy with the recommended changes.
A second.
Okay?
1.
2. All right, so are there any questions or comments? All right, so all in favor of moving forward with this policy with the recommended changes presented tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes. All right, so the next item on the agenda is our 3-year technology strategic plan update.
Okay. Dr. Raper has some updated information there. We will not plan to go through the whole strategic plan again unless somebody wishes to do that, but we do have some information on the cost proposals that are part of that.
Yeah, so I'm calling it version C1. So version C1 of the Technology Strategic Plan is exactly the same as presented in November, except page 29 adds a cost summary for each goal of the strategic plan. And so that's presented for your review and acceptance. I guess actually the whole plan.
You're good with everybody?
We are. We're good. What we need basically...
Well, we're going to ask questions and comments.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just for clarification, if I read this correctly, it says that the board approved, that the local funding is board approved technology budget. Is that what you anticipate already being in the budget, or will these be extra line items that will need to be considered to be added?
Yeah, so good question. So in the delineation of where I expect the money to come from, the local refers to the current board approved budget. I'm assuming it's not going down. So assuming that stays consistent or increases for the technology that's already been allocated. And then the sales tax, technology is allocated 10% of that every other year. And we actually had a good increase this year that made me feel very comfortable about being able to fund the rest of this.
Great.
So the access point upgrades, it's already in the budget.
Correct. The biggest part of that was actually covered by E-rate. E-rate is provided by the FCC, and it's actually a funding discount. So we never get that money. We paid for category 2 15% of the costs, and then E-rate paid the other 85% of those costs in this case. But the biggest bulk of that was paid by, in this case, the FCC. Our total E-rate budget, if you're curious, we get $167 a student. We have 5,800 students, so it's about $968,000 in a 5-year span. And then we pay 15% of that. E-rate pays 85% of that. And as you can see, the biggest portion this time went toward access points, and most times, honestly.
When was the last time there was an upgrade like this? I mean, how long? I mean, I know technology's changing all the time, but.
So, I mean, it's continually getting updated. If you're asking, like, the last time the access points were updated, they were under Andrew, and I would guess it was about 5 to 7 years ago. And I would expect in about 5 or 6 years to be upgrading all the access points again.
The ones in this, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just for clarification, the access points, is that to improve Wi-Fi coverage in the buildings? Or is
Yeah,
that
so we're replacing 1-for-1. So everywhere you see an access point, it's pretty much getting another one. We bought a couple of extra, but it will improve it. They are new radios. The old ones are starting to fail just from usage, and then also some updated technologies and efficiencies that come into place. All of our MacBooks, so for example, at the middle school and high school, use a technology called Wi-Fi 6 that these access points will have. They make it more efficient, and then it just helps the wireless everywhere else.
Other questions? All right, you want to present this as a recommendation?
I do. This is a recommendation to the board to accept the 3-year strategic plan dealing with technology.
All right, so we have a recommendation for the technology strategic plan as a 3-year plan. Want to entertain a motion?
I so move.
Second? Second. All right, any comments or questions? All right, so all in favor of moving forward and accepting this, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it approves.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of director's evaluation document. all of you received that document and have the opportunity to review that. So what's your pleasure?
So, entertaining motion.
Mhm.
So moved.
All right, we had a first.
Second.
And a second? All right. Any comments or questions? No comments or questions? All in favor of accepting this director's evaluation instrument for 2022-2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, approved. All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of Board of Education self-evaluation document. What's your pleasure?
So moved.
First here.
Second.
Second here. All right, any comments, questions? All right, so we have a first, we have a second. All in favor of moving forward with this Board of Education self-evaluation document? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and approved all the way.
If I could add one thing on that document, the idea is that you will complete that on your own, and you can just submit that to Andrea sometime in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll compile that and bring it back together at the February meeting. So just at your leisure, just complete that and send that back to Andrea.
And could you remind me one more time, when is it that we add those individual goals? Is that after you've met with everybody?
Yes. Yes, so I will get those out to you sometime in the not so distant future.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the strategic plan focus.
Yes, we have special education. Dr. Stone is going to present to us tonight.
All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, let me thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to provide an update. I know it's a busy night, and although I'll try to keep my presentation brief, I do hope it'll provide you a clear portrait of our special ed population and, you know, our efforts to serve them. Next slide here. This first slide provides you a very good snapshot of how our students with special needs are distributed across the district. So I'll try to explain just briefly, you know, so you have all of our schools, and you have the number of students that are students with disabilities, is the stands for. And I provided a column. I wanted to provide a column to compare that to last year, so we can try to gain some understanding of how we're growing. And you can see our number of certified teachers that serve those kids, and the number of classified assistants that work with those. And just to give some comparison, you can see when you take that number, you get a student to adult ratio and so if you look at the bottom column, it gives you a broad picture, you know, at the time that we calculated this. Now, I will say these numbers change daily, so this gives you at least an approximate number of students that we have. So we serve, and that number is actually, today I checked it, has actually grown to 858 students as of today. So we have had a little spurt growth. But if you look over on the right column and you look at that ratio, you know, we average about for every adult that serves, they can serve about 10 students. And so, for example, why this is helpful, it allows us to see where our needs are. And so, for example, Candies Creek, which has experienced extreme growth, you can see that their number of students is growing, you know, at a much faster rate than some of the others. And back in the fall semester, you all approved, we actually added a certified position. And we are in the process of hiring another classified assistant to assist Candies Creek with that growth. Any questions about this particular screen? Okay. Next screen. And this gives you a kind of a snapshot of the range of disabilities that we currently serve. These are federally defined disabilities, and you know, just this gives you an opportunity to kind of look at those, and then this is very typical of what you see across the country. Typically, the largest areas when you look at other school districts is students with specific learning disabilities. In our case, we have a slightly higher number of students that are served for speech and language disabilities. And I just want to give you time just in case you have questions about this particular screen. All right, the next slide. I provided this because this is the same information, except I wanted to show you how, what we're experiencing over time. So this is a snapshot of the last 3 years. And so I took these numbers, we drew these numbers at the same point in each year. One thing to understand is our special education population will experience steady growth throughout a school year. And part of that has to do with, families moving in during the school year, but a big part of that growth also has to do with what we call our child find efforts. And we identify, students, we actually serve students 3 to 5 before they start school. And so we have a constant sort of steady flow of referrals and, students that will qualify for special ed services throughout the year. So some of that growth that we see from the fall to the spring has a lot to do with, the pre-K, our pre-K programs as students are identified initially. One thing that I wanted to point out that is interesting in our community is if you look at that, when you look at the category of autism, when you compare, let's go, as a matter of fact, let's go to the next screen. You can see a graph that breaks this down a little better. When you look at the different areas, one area that we're seeing just kind of steady, sort of linear growth is students with autism. We're seeing a steady increase in families moving in, or students that are served with autism. And let's see, I may have a few updates. As a matter of fact, that number has, if we go back to the previous slide, you can see in 2020 we had 110, we went to 125, and at the point we actually, these numbers I generated right before Christmas. So we were 137 before Christmas, and we're actually at 140 as of today. So we're seeing steady growth there. I'll come back to that because it has some of how we're investing, and when we get to the funding part, I may refer back to that. So let's go to the next slide.
David,
Oh,
I
yes,
had
I'm
a
sorry.
question about
Sure.
the intellectual. Why do you see that decreasing?
I really don't have a clear explanation for why that might be decreasing. I mean, you see just, I really don't. I don't have a, these numbers will fluctuate year to year, and that's just the pattern that we're currently in. It's only a 3-year snapshot, but I don't have a clear explanation for that.
David, our ESL students, at what point can an ESL student be certified as having a learning disability? What do they have to know first before you can?
So, our responsibility, if we suspect a disability, we do have a responsibility to tease out any environmental or cultural things that may mimic a disability. We work very closely with our ESL department to help us sort of navigate that and try to determine, and we actually are, our ESL department actually took the lead on that too. They've incorporated a new tool that helps sort of disseminate what might be just a language challenge versus an actual disability. And it's our ESL population is growing at a tremendous rate, and that does present a pretty significant challenge to tease out, is this an actual disability versus, is this just a deficit due to, inability to be in school or, cultural things. But we really put a lot of effort. One of our school psychologists, for example, is bilingual. That helps us tremendously. And we look at opportunities to outsource if we need someone with that specialized skill to help us tease it out. So far, we feel like we're managing that, but it is a challenge that we've recognized.
Are any of those tests available in their language that they speak?
We do. I mean, primarily, Spanish. We do have most of our tools. We have Spanish versions. Of course, that Spanish is not our only, cultural group or language group that
And so that is a need that we continue to try to expand. But that's our main challenge is helping students that speak Spanish.
And where do you access those tests or people that can administer a test in a foreign language?
Where do we?
Where can you get anyone to do that for you?
Well, most of the vendors that norm the tests are now providing, bilingual or multi-language tests. So we're fortunate, like Pearson, the different vendors that we use. So that's part, we budget that in. I mean, so it's costly, but it is something that we do have Spanish
I never
versions.
had to deal with.
Yeah, so that's,
okay.
But it's important to also have the personnel
Right.
that can interpret, and communicate to those families. Next slide, please. Or any other questions before I move to the next slide? So I wanted to, this is our budget that our district invests to serve our special education students. So the GP, our general purpose budget, invests over $5 million to serve our special ed population. So that's, the bulk of that money is salaries to pay personnel, from certified teachers to support staff. That's a big part of it. That also includes everything from, materials to bus drivers that drive the special ed buses, even the diesel fuel that goes in buses that are categorized as special education. So, so that's what we fund locally, and that's what you all approve as part of that budget. In addition to that, we receive federal funds of almost $1.5 million. And when you add in, so that's divided by where it says IDA Part B, that's referring to students in kindergarten through 12th grade. And then where it says IDA PS, that stands for IDA preschool. So you see about $100,000, close to $100,000 that is dedicated specifically for our children that are ages 3 to 5 before they start kindergarten. So that's where we get that total of $6.6 million. And so that's our primary budget. If we'll go to the next slide, there are additional funds that we continue to receive. During the, we typically will pursue a number of grants. This year we are still currently receiving a grant to fund a pre-K position. That is a position that can actually go out into the field and serve students ages 3 to 5 in various pre-K programs, whether it be Head Start or even private pre-K programs. And then we also, there is the ARP, that's the American Rescue, I'm trying to remember what the program, I believe is what it stands for. So that's part of those funds that we've received over the last couple of years to assist with the various challenges associated with the pandemic and all of that, which has been very challenging. So we still, this year we are using up about $300,000, and we've used that fund has been extremely helpful to allow us. There's been times where we've need extra personnel to sort of supplement, when we have people out, that are sick or difficult to fill positions. But one of the reasons I highlighted the growth in students with autism this year, we're using some of these extra funds, which will end at the end of this year, to try to invest in various sensory spaces and to try to create environments that will allow us to meet the needs of that growing population, that students with autism. And those environments, of course, also benefit other students as well, both regular ed and special ed.
Do you still get money back from cases that cost a great deal?
We do. We have those high cost
Mm-hmm.
things, and so typically we have 1 or 2 students that funding though is rapidly disappearing, and they have changed that formula, and so that's becoming more difficult to get. But we have been fortunate over the past couple of years to have some extra funding that we're trying to, use those funds to also prepare for the upcoming years. And so I believe, is that the last slide, I believe. Any questions about
David,
special ed?
has the federal government increased their funding in the last few years?
No, the Congress is still, they seem to be focused on other things at this time, unfortunately. So no, that They have not. Now, some of the federal funds, and I don't know if this is how the state has managed those funds. We did get a one-time increase this year, so we actually got close to $100,000 extra this year that the state didn't really provide basically that money funnels through the state office. And so that IDA money typically is pretty consistent from year to year, so we can kind of prepare or plan when we look at sustained costs like personnel. But this year, they didn't really provide much explanation other than that there were extra funds this year that they have distributed. And so right before Christmas, we actually were allocated close to $100,000 extra, and that's all part of one of the things we're trying to do with that funds and also the remaining art funds is not only those Century spaces that I mentioned, but also look for just equipment, things like that that are worn, that need to be replaced. And so we met with teachers as part of our PD and really try to identify, just how we can just infrastructure type things like a changing table, to make sure that it's adequate. We bought some lifts to help, if you have a child in a wheelchair that needs to be assisted out of their chair, to another chair or to a changing table, that sort of thing. So we're using that funding to purchase just the basic fundamental equipment that we need to meet the needs of our special needs students.
Some of us went to Washington a couple of 3 years ago, and one of the reasons we went is to try to influence our legislators to increase the funding, and of course, yeah, we'll do it,
Yeah.
But that's why I was wondering, I hadn't heard that it has been increased, but.
It is not, still, not to this point.
I mean, it's been years since they've done anything as far as increasing just the regular percentage.
Yep.
I had one more question. I know we're doing a lot more inclusion. Is that making our costs rise, and how is that working? Does it call for more employees?
Well, right. So all this is part of just our efforts to make sure that we align our practices with the current interpretation of what federal law says. And so, right, the federal law talks very specifically about serving students in the least restrictive environment and giving them opportunities to be in the regular ed setting. And so, yes, it is costly to do that because, it takes personnel. A lot of those students need, more individualized support in those settings. And so it's a delicate balance of, for us to provide that, a broad continuum of services, that being the ultimate goal is how any student, our ultimate goal is can we get them back into the regular ed setting so they have the opportunity to be with their peers. But yeah, that's a challenge we face.
Are there any other questions, comments? We definitely appreciate the work you do in this area. It's much needed, and appreciate your faithfulness. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Wow, it's 12%. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the student representatives update, but she wasn't able to be with us tonight, so we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda after that, which is board officer elections. And in this particular agenda item, turn this over to Dr. Dyer for him to perform this section of the meeting.
All right. Well, by board policy 1.200, every January we go through and the board elects new officers for the upcoming year. According to board policy, the board shall organize by electing a chairman and a vice chairman to serve 1-year terms or until a successor is named. So my task tonight is to take nominations for both of those and to have the roll call of your votes and to go from there. So at this point, I will entertain a nomination for chair of the Cleveland City Schools Board of Education.
I'd like to nominate Nate Tucker.
Okay. So Nate Tucker has a nomination. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a second. Discussion? Okay.
He's done a good job on the last 2 or 3 meetings that whatever he's been, our chairperson, he's done a good job.
You showed us what you can do, and you've done good.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Those who would like to vote in the affirmative, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, congratulations.
And I can't oppose myself.
You can oppose yourself. Well, actually, you could.
I'm just kidding.
Come to think of it. All right, next is vice chair. So congratulations, vice chair. Any nominations for the vice chair of the Cleveland City
I'd like
Schools
to
Board of
nominate
Education?
Krista.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Krista McKay.
Second.
We have a second. Any comment? Okay. Those who would like to vote in the affirmative for Krista McKay as the vice chair, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. So now we have officers. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dyer.
You're welcome.
All right, so that was the last item on the agenda. Any new business or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to throw out a question, whether we might want to reconsider and push back our currently scheduled mini retreat that's scheduled for January 31st. If we might want to consider pushing that back into February, since we've got quite a full calendar of school board obligations over the next 3 weeks. It might be nice to spread those out a little bit if possible. So I thought moving that to February might be more beneficial.
So we don't have to vote on that in this meeting, but we can discuss it. Anybody have any comments, any agreement, disagreement?
How about I send out a couple of days and we all look at them?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
Go from there.
We
I
can
don't have
check
a
tomorrow
problem
for
with
dates that work for our calendar and then send out a doodle or something to get those comments.
Or we've got this thing coming up here pretty soon, and we maybe just bring our calendars to that and see how productive we are in that little issue we gotta deal with.
That'd be a good place,
Okay.
we'd have our calendars with us, so we
Right.
could look at them and see.
Okay,
Mhm.
sure.
Okay. Any other comments, suggestions, questions? All right, it is 6:24 and we'll declare this meeting adjourned.